let's just get started.
Okay, first of all, let's just say a cheers to everybody who wants to, like raise a glass of water or whatever. Wine, me with my dark beer. Happy hour is officially opened. Welcome everybody. So David, let's just talk about what our last couple of weeks have been like since let's see, who was on our last call? The last call was...
Oh my gosh.
Laura, who was on our last call?
I know, I'm sitting here. Burning Man, Marianne Goodall.
Marianne, oh my God, Marianne. So let's, the CEO of Burning Man. So David, are you more likely to come to Burning Man now after hearing Marianne? No.
Well, it's not my scene, but I'm saying that not having been there, but I think, so Rob Angel hit me up, Rob from Inventor Pictionary, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna go, I know how to do the deal. I said, all right, man, listen, if you're going and I get to stay in your bus and you can be my guide to keep me out of the orgy tent, I'm good, I'll go.
Oh, you're just spreading myths again.
How is Burning Man going to evolve? What is its next iteration?
Good question, Alisa. Well, so I was on the board of, I was a founding board member of Burning Man at the board. And so I know a little bit about this, but we did a virtual reality Burning Man that actually was really popular. But the truth is, there's URL and there's IRL. And there's a big difference between URL and IRL. Our mirror neurons can only dance so much in this format that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think, I would be very surprised if Burning Man is doing the IRL in real life experience next September or next August. I think it's probably a year after that. But the good news for Burning Man is it has a lot of people who support it, and it needs to raise money. The organization needs to raise money because it's a $40 million a year operation that, if you don't have an event, it's hard to raise that money from ticket sales. So,
yeah.
So David, what have you been doing in the last 2 weeks?
Well, it's been very, what happens, Chip, is when you start initiatives, you have to follow them through. You have to act on them. So ideas are all fine and good, but you have to add action. And so there's been a lot of action, and it's been very busy. But what's nice is I'm here in Park City, Utah, so I can do my whole workaholic thing. But it's not like being in New York or LA. I go outside and there's like mountains and so I'll tell you the big thing. The aspens are turning yellow.
Oh yes.
Oh, it's so amazing. All these mountains and they're just all this bright yellow, and it's so it puts it into perspective. Like
there's nothing outside your window. Like if you took your computer to the laptop, could we see it right now?
No.
Oh,
not enough. But I'll send you my CTO wants me to take pictures every day, like Life of David, like what I see out here.
Yeah.
And so put it up on the site every day, like a new picture of like what goes on. Because
every day, we're aging and we're getting better. Pilar's going to be doing that in Brooklyn. She's got some aspens turning there. Well, I am now in Houston with my two sons and their lesbian moms, and I took a hitch, which was a very interesting thing. It was 1/5 the price of Uber, and it's not because I was piled into a car with 10 people. It was great. I went from Austin, where I live part of the year, to Houston today, and it was great. And I spent the afternoon trampolining with my sons and playing football. The trampolining, when you have sides on it, I just remember trampolines being dangerous because you'd bounce and then you'd bounce off and you break your arm. Now you have these sides to it, and you hit the sides and you come back in. It's like, oh my God, this is like lesbian roller derby or something like that. I mean, it's crazy. And I got to tell you, I'm tired. I'm tired.
I love a trampoline maybe more than anything, except for when you pee a little, which is not fun when you're a woman and you've had a baby.
Is that a midlife
really
thing?
Not fun.
That's
a thing.
It's a thing. Okay.
I was a competitive gymnast.
Well,
so I've got other theories on that. Yeah.
One of our sponsors is
No, it's a
Depends.
midlife thing.
We'll send you
it's
a
a
lifetime
birthday
a lifetime subscription to Depends, and you'll be fine.
No, not that extreme. Just,
No,
just,
okay.
a little, just a
How
little.
old are your children? How old are your boys?
Oh, mine, 5 and 8, Eli and Ethan, and
Oh,
yeah, sweeties, and and it's yeah. And then last week I was out. I'm not gonna tell you where, but I was out and about looking for an MEA location in the United States, and more on that later. But not later today, but later in the future. But yeah, so we're we open this Sunday for our sabbatical sessions, which is the pivot we've made for this next year, where people come for extended stays with lighter programming and a bit of more of a self-curation kind of experience. But yeah, we're looking for something in the US, and we have a really great location, so I'm pretty excited.
That's great.
exciting.
Well, let's introduce. I mean, let's make this official. Let's bring these gals on because they're just talking with us, so we might as well introduce them. Do you mind if I do that, David?
It's all yours, Jeff. Take it.
All right. Pilar Guzman and Alisa Volkman are the co-founders of the Swell, which is a membership-based community providing tools to help you live a better, bolder, wiser, more intentional life, midlife. The program includes expert-led gatherings, digital curricula, products, celebrations, and more. They apply modern science, leading thinkers, and collective wisdom to tackle the most important topics we press up against in this phase of our lives. Girls, you're fucking taking over my MEA model. What the hell is this? Okay, let's come back to that. Pilar is the seasoned editor-in-chief, specializing in creating and in bringing media brands to life. She led Powerhouse Publications, Conde Nast Traveler, Martha Stewart Living. Do tell us about Martha Stewart on this call. And
Yes, please.
Alisa is a passionate entrepreneur who has co-founded and built several digital media companies, including Babble, Spring Street Networks, and Nerve. So they're here with us partly because I'm a fanboy of the two of them. And let's just start by—
Feelings mutual.
Yeah, well, tell us about your story. How the two of you came together, and then how the Swell swelled up and emerged.
Alisa, you hit it.
Okay. We always want to give the floor to the other. Well, Pilar and I go way back. We've been friends for a long time. And as we both like to say, we're sort of in a co-opetition relationship or cooperative relationship. When she was building Cookie magazine for modern parents, and my husband and I were building a site called Babble. And we were both sort of tackling the new modern era of parenting for this generation of parents. And we always really admired each other's work, and were in sort of collective circles and social circles, and then went about our lives. Babble went on to be acquired by Disney. Pilar went on to do extraordinary things at Conde Nast. And in our next sort of phase of work, we each collectively, which we'll get more into here, sort of stumbled into our own midlife awakenings and experiences, not a crisis.
Good for you. Good for you. Thank you.
And when this started sort of germinating, we were talking a lot, and it's a longer story I'm sure we'll share, but really had this aha moment. I had been building a digital company that was focused on short format learning, lifelong learning, and I've just and over time, as I was building it, I realized that I was seeking something deeper just within myself. I joke that I've created digital companies around my own identity crises, and I had one in my 20s, which was solved for by Nerve, where we were addressing the 20s identity crisis, and I stumbled into a new identity crisis when I became a mother. So we created a site around problem solving, and as Pilar and I were going through our own collective midlife experiences, this aha moment went off where we were once again in the throes of another sort of identity crisis, but for us really felt like an awakening and an incredible opportunity to really reassess our lives, which I think many of us do, and locked arms and are jumping off the cliff together to build this.
Wow. Pilar?
So as Alisa said, parenting was the big, anybody who worked in media, mothers were considered to be the least sexy people to address as an audience, and midlife is a probably close second there. And I think we look around at our peers and people who we've come up with in business and in our personal lives, and we feel like everybody that we, you know, look at today, they've never sort of been sort of more sure of themselves. They've never felt wiser. We've never felt better in some ways. And yet what gets reflected back is this kind of, you know, this image that feels a little depends, right? Which is not how we feel, the trampoline notwithstanding. You know, and I think that one of the things that we are both very sort of, you know, competitive by nature. And I think that in some ways we want to remake this life stage to reflect how we feel at this point. And that being said, while we feel totally sort of, you know, we feel totally comfortable in our skins on the one hand, it is also this intense moment of disruption where we are sort of in this sandwich generation between aging parents and adolescent or adult children. And, you know, we are sort of carrying the weight of all of these things and facing, you know, our marriages or our relationships as we face empty nest and all of the things. And I think, you know, I think what's confusing is that, you know, there's a kind of cultural dysmorphia around this life stage that we feel sort of, you know, we feel excited to combat and reframe and re-message, because I think so much of the problem is that the messaging is bad. The reality is exciting.
Yeah, and on that note, exactly. I mean, I would say, you know, when we were sort of both coming together over this, I think as many here can probably relate, is, you know, when we hit up against midlife, I think the media and the marketplace we've sort of grown up in, and our parents' midlife, you know, certainly sort of led you to believe that you become irrelevant at a certain age. And I think, you know, we were long ago dying in our 60s, you know, retiring in our 50s, dying in our 60s, 70s. And I think not only are we living much longer today, so we really are, you know, kind of creating a new prime of life. But I think, you know, we sort of joke that no one enjoys getting their AARP card. It has, you know, terrible associations with it. For the most part, people are, you know, sort of cringe. And really what we've had historically from a marketing perspective is midlife crisis and AARP. Those are sort of the two things available to you outside of, you know, erectile dysfunction and dental care and all the different things that we're sort of battling. But we felt like when we looked around at our community, ourselves, I'm sure everyone here, we were sort of living our best lives. We've never felt sort of more sure of who we are and what we want. I think, you know, science is really catching up to how we can sort of live more intentionally with more purpose and meaning. I think we're really starting to understand science in a new way that's sort of extending those life cycles. So the opportunity to not only rebrand midlife as really the new center point of life, which is really the sweet spot of life. And we've accumulated so much wisdom and expertise and knowledge along the way that we can actually utilize in much more interesting ways with a level of humility and maturity that we've gained. We think is just a fantastic phase to be in. So we really, you know, from a branding perspective, want to really help reshape the way this looks and sounds and hopefully experience. And so that's what we're doing.
I'm going to pass it on to David in a moment to ask a question, but I have a thought for the audience. In the chat, if we were to actually change the brand from midlife crisis to midlife fill in the blank, what would be the fill in the blank? Now, Brené Brown, who is here in Houston, a good friend of mine, she says it's the midlife unraveling, but she says it's a positive unraveling. So what would you call midlife if you were if you were a branding expert and you were going to rebrand midlife? What additional word would you add as the second word to midlife? Put it in the chat. Okay. David, you're up.
Well, Alisa, you stole my book. You've read my deck. I mean,
or we're just in the same phase of life.
Yeah, we're in the same phase of life. I mean, you know, ARP. I mean, oh my God. I watched Anderson Cooper on live television.
I saw that.
Right, he received the death card. Like, talk about a branding problem. Oh my God.
Well, and also I watched that same thing, and he was like, "How do they find you?" He's like, "How do they know where I am?" Like, it
Like
just
they're
appears.
parked outside of your house watching you blow out your birthday candles on your 50th birthday, and like ding dong.
But it's exactly what you're talking. I love your term cultural dysmorphia because that's what it is. It's like how I feel and how I see myself. I see myself reflected as a medical disaster. Like I need my bag of meds or I'm going to die.
Totally.
I don't know anybody like that. Like who are these people? That's not me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And it's, I think it's sort of this convergence of a couple of things. It's sort of why, when I'm feeling like that I'm actually hitting my stride and I know what haircut looks right on me and I know what pant cut is right and all of the things, the eyewear, everything. And then all of a sudden it's sort of, the messaging reflected back is quite the opposite. It's sort of, okay, and exit stage left.
Well, it's the, so we talk a lot about aspirational view. So that's what we do at Aegis. Like we do, everything's aspirational, which is something that is what you do when you're going to speak to like a 20-year-old, right? Everything's aspirational. But then once you reach this sort of mark in the road, like, I don't know what it is, like 45, it's no longer aspirational. It's the opposite. It's like, whatever they've got, I don't want to catch it sort of idea. And I just think there's such an opportunity there. Like, what's up with that?
Right. Yeah.
We recently, one of the things that we often talk about is this idea that midlife is more akin to adolescence than it is to any other life stage. With all of its, forget about the hormonal surges for a second, because to some degree, yes, of course, that's a thing. But really just the level of disruption and upheaval and introspection and who am I and all of these questions that I watch my own adolescence going through, we suddenly have a little bandwidth to think about at this stage.
Right.
There's a word. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
It's that whole question of like, as simple as like, what should I wear? Like, what's right for me? Should I dress like Kanye? Or,
So
I don't know. It's funny.
But this is where it gets a little interesting, because if you try to be an adolescent, I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung, who the Jung Institute is here in Houston. Carl Jung says you can't live the afternoon of your life based upon the rules of the morning. And what we all know is there are people in their whatever age who they're like, we saw him actually on Tuesday night I think it was Tuesday night when the debate was. They're an adult adolescent. Now, we had Barb Waxman as one of our guests on the show, and she is one of the people who's popularizing the idea of middlescence. So adolescence as a word is only 116 years old. In 1904, frankly, prior to 1904, you're an adult at puberty. And so the question is, what is middlescence? What's the purpose of middlescence? Middlescence is this period of time when you're going through emotional and physical hormonal changes. So my opinion on it is this, and it comes again from Carl Jung a little bit. Adolescence to middlescence, our primary operating system is our ego. And it's the thing that actually individuates us. It's the thing that helps us to say, who are we? How do we make ourselves different in the world, etc. And then there's something that starts to shift in, midlife, or the core of midlife, around middlescence, around maybe 45 to 60, let's say, where you start to be a little bit less egocentric. And I'm not saying, if you have kids, you're not going to have time to be egocentric.
Yeah.
There is something that happens, and I think the primary operating system starts to move from the ego to the soul. Now, some people look at me like, oh, Chip, you spent way too much time in California. But I really do believe this. And I actually think for some people who actually have a hard time with this shift, it's because they actually don't want to do the inner work. And they don't have to go to spend, a week at Esalen to do it. Literally, it could be just getting comfortable with being in your own skin just as it's starting to sag. And instead of trying to actually constantly make yourself presentable to the world. Now, this is where David and I might actually have some differences of opinion, because he's very good. He's very good at showing the world, you can look great at 75 years old. And my point of view is like, I don't give a fuck what I look like at 75 years old. I hope I look like a big leather bag, because at the end of the day, at 75 years old, which is only 15 years ahead for me, I hope that what's going on inside of me is much more important than what's going on outside of me. But I've spent most of my life living the other way, focused on the outside. But I do have my lighting, special lighting, to make sure I look better, because a bird in my ear told me,
You and Barbara Walters.
you're not looking very good in terms of your lighting. So
Totally.
Thing I was going to add about this that I think is a real differentiator is I think, you know, on one hand, I think there's a real rebranding, and I love seeing these comments coming in chat, because they're, by the way, all the words, we embrace all of these. These are all so spot on and exactly how we feel. But it's also an opportunity, I think, and with sort of age comes humility, right, and wisdom. And I think this is an opportunity. We feel sort of this nice balance of never better, but also never willing to be more vulnerable. And I think what we found, I think both Pilar and I at our last businesses, when I was building Babble, she was building Cookie, is when I became a new mother, no one was talking about the difficult things. It was like, I was led to believe it was supposed to be wonderful and great, and I was supposed to be happy, and this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And quietly inside, I was really struggling and just felt like it was not okay to have difficult moments, not okay to talk about miscarriage, not okay. It was okay, but not really something that you did out in the open. And all of the materials that were available sort of, you know, were disconnected from what I was experiencing. And I think we find this once again with midlife. So on one hand, it's this incredible, rewarding opportunity. And Pilar and I believe that the future is more emotional and human and creative and vulnerable. But we also believe there's an opportunity with all of this joy to also really look at things in a more raw, vulnerable way. And so we're also spending a lot of time in our conversations and discussions, you know, going over things that are triggered in this phase of life that people are, you know, really need community around, but maybe are too sort of scared to ask, don't know where to go, don't know how to navigate some of these issues. So we really want to bring these issues also out into the forefront with our work.
There's also this sense of urgency to get it right at this stage, which I think is sort of critical. And I think that's just a factor of, you know, seeing that there is just limited runway, you know, not in a morbid way, but really like, you know, when you're 20, you think, okay, I've got a million more years. And when you're 50, it's quite a different thing. And so you become much more precise in your decision making and who you choose to spend your time with and how you spend your time and what matters. And I think that sort of that sharpening of focus is so important. And I think, you know, back to your comment, Chip, about the ego sort of receding, shall we say, for lack of a better word, there is also all of this misconception around, you know, the inevitable decline of the brain at this age, when in fact there are many things that become stronger and you know, more florid at this life stage, including our ability to pattern match and abstract think and this notion of wisdom, which is actually a neurological sort of, you know, awakening that happens at this stage of life, which is about this. Actually, I've seen this movie before because I've lived a really long time, and I can skip the 80 steps that my 30-year-old self would have had to have taken in order to arrive at the same conclusion. And these things are not being celebrated because of this, what we call this cultural dysmorphia. And I think that's important too, just that actually forget about the, like, you know, you go girl. It's not about that so much as actually there's all this other stuff that we do really well that we need to celebrate that is actually science-backed. And sometimes people need that scientific girding in order to be convinced, you know?
So beautiful. David, before David goes, just feel free to throw some questions in the chat because in about 10 minutes, Laura will come in and start asking some of these questions to Pilar and Alisa. David.
I just find this so interesting. I just love what you guys are doing. I just, to be a counterpoint to Chip, because I'm the surface guy, I'm the straight guy, but I'm the surface guy. Paulina Porosova, the model, told me not too long ago. She said,
I love her.
she's
Love her.
awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
She's going through
So
some
great.
heavy.
I have no idea who she is, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, you do.
Yes, you do. You would recognize her. She was like the
Really?
big model of the 80s. You know who she is.
Okay.
But you know,
Rhythm 6.
so she said to me, it's easier to be heard when you're seen, and
Wow.
which I think is really, for us guys, it's not as big of a thing, but I think for women, I think it's a really big thing. And how you're seen and how you're referenced like that it's complicated. You know, it's something that I know, like if you look at Paulina's Instagram, it's something she's really wrestling with, like what to do that. I mean, what do you guys have any insights on that?
I mean, first of all, I think she, you know, as the model of the 80s whose teeth you never saw, like she quite literally never opened her mouth. She is amazing. And what she is doing for this stage of life, which I'm seeing in the questions, how are you defining this phase of life? I think we're calling it, you know, we say 40 plus, but I think we're really talking about 45 plus, you know, 45 to whatever, because I kind of feel like I don't even want to put an end date on it. It just doesn't seem right. But I think that, you know, to Alisa's point, this kind of, you know, never felt better, never felt more vulnerable kind of beautiful, perfect storm is sort of where Paulina is at. And somebody as beautiful. So Chip, she was, you know, this 80s model who was like the most beautiful. And, you know, you'd recognize her if you saw it, you just didn't know her name. But she is just putting it all out there, and she will shoot, you know, do selfies and, you know, show herself made up, not made up. And it's extraordinary. The active vulnerability for somebody who was all about sort of the artifice and the surface is, you know, exactly what we need in this moment to kind of have the conversations.
What's do you hear that?
What's that?
Yeah. Okay, maybe not. So here, I have a question for Pilar and Alisa. I have a bunch of women friends who are in their 60s, and one of them is a woman named Kay Scora. She's a guest faculty member at MEA, and she was going to teach a workshop this coming year, which obviously is getting postponed because of COVID, called "The Power of Invisibility." So it's sort of the opposite of what David was saying. And she says the thing she loves about being in her 60s is being invisible. And so could you unpack that for us, those of us men who don't understand what that means? And do you see some validity in that? And feel free in the chat to give us your perspective on if you're a woman who feels more invisible, but there's something freeing that comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, you know, I have a mother who was a kind of, you know, a singer, actress, and she's now 84. And I watch her dealing with her sort of aging process. And she was, you know, very front and center and still takes like 2.5 hours to put her makeup on. But when she comes to visit us in New York, as she does, and, you know, and she actually will use the word, and she's not recognized so much anymore, but she will say, I come here and I feel invisible and it feels great. That she does not do the 2.5 hour sort of put on the face, even though nobody's really paying attention when you're 84. But, you know, but that this idea that she kind of gets to just be and not, you know, even though her whole life was about sort of being seen in this very public way. And this is an extreme, sort of slightly extreme example, but I think there's a relief, a sense of relief that you're no longer fronting, that you're no longer literally putting on a face, that I think women, especially of that generation, 60s plus, I think we are in a slightly different, you know, there are certainly, there's a holdover, but there was very much this idea that you wouldn't go out without pantyhose and a face full of makeup if you were a woman of a certain generation. And I think that's probably depending on who you are and where you live and if you're, how groovy you are or not. Like, you know, the idea of a face of makeup is a real thing that women, I think, are probably many of whom are very relieved to be able to shed at a certain point because nobody's looking.
Well,
And that's a relief.
Well, I think what I would add though as part of that is I think beyond that, I think it's about getting to a point where you don't place value, your own value, into other people's hands, right? I think when you're young, you're sort of living in a way where you're seeking approval from a lot of people. And your identity is wrapped up in your career, your identity is wrapped up in your spouse, your identity is wrapped up in your children. And you reach a point where your identity becomes wrapped up around yourself. And I think, so invisibility, I think, could also just be an opportunity to go more inward and to not really seek the sort of approval I think we've been sort of designed to seek as we're army crawling our way through our lives. And I think it's so refreshing to get to a point where you're able to have the conversations you want to have, you're able to address the things you've been wanting to address, you're able to look at things you weren't willing to look at before. And so there's probably invisibility in that way as well. But I think is real, a real sort of liberation.
Beautiful. Well, David, I'll take it back to you, and then maybe we'll open it up to the audience.
I have nothing to add, surprisingly. You guys are, this never happens. I'm really curious.
You're verklempt.
I want to hear what the questions are.
Okay.
This.
All right. Let's open. There's a lot of, the chat's going nuts. We love that. And thank you everybody for being so engaged. I'm going to pass it on to Laura, and we will go into the questions earlier. Actually, let me ask one question before we go to Laura. So tell us just a little bit more about the Swell. We understand a little bit about it. It's a new thing. It launched at just as we were going into COVID, and it's a membership only, so not everybody can be part of it. What would you like the Swell to look like 5 years from now?
Yeah, and I would say, it's really important to us that we are an open and inclusive brand and community. I think when we just recently launched, and I think its original intention, as with any new businesses, is we wanted to start small, mainly because we wanted to really study and iterate and pivot, accordingly as you're sort of building. And we wanted to start with a foundation of not really just members, but community sort of thinkers. And, through scientists and authors and thought leaders and creative leaders and people that really could help us address the topics that we were pressing up against in this phase of life. So we intentionally sort of invited a community in to really sort of create that foundation. So it was sort of membership led, but I will say COVID, I think for the better, changed our business, where we more rapidly moved towards digital, more rapidly opened everything up. And as we've been building a real community that we think has an opportunity to become a movement, all of us collectively, right? I think all of us are sort of joining hands in this, is we're creating conversation, community, connection around shared experiences, applying modern science and thinkers to help us navigate these issues in a way that is really meaningful and creates real change. And we are then creating materials, distilled materials around those. So we sort of call ourselves like a master class for midlife, meets a little bit of TED, meets a little bit of Burning Man, maybe, it's a real coming together. So, we've been growing pretty rapidly. We are about to sort of launch the next tier, which really is going to be dependent on however you want to access our community. It's going to be open to you. You can access it for free by, following us, signing up for our newsletters, coming to our live conversations, and occasionally we open up our gatherings and have summits. You can become sort of a subscriber, where you're like, I'm busy, but I love what you're doing. I want to read your materials, and I want to do it on my own time. And you can become a member, which is really, we want to welcome everybody. And that's really for people that want to go deeper, that want to have a connection, that really want to dig into certain topics and really contribute their own wisdom and expertise and sort of receive as well. So those are sort of our things. We are sort of membership subscription based, but growing, and would love to obviously have all of you guys.
And at some point we will have you at MEA. You will do a week at MEA, right?
We would love that.
Okay,
We would absolutely love that.
Yes, David is still coming, even though it's just sabbatical sessions, but we have it with him. So Laura, take it away.
All right. So Pilar and Alisa, we received an email from John Hayes, and he had a couple of questions. So I'll I'll give you all the questions. The gist of it is just understanding how you built out the models, seed money, and what your experiences were. So the questions are this. I noticed they had multiple sources of seed money and funding, and wondering how that came about. What was your experience? And how did you describe such a complex concept?
So Pilar and I, have the benefit of having run, content companies, building brands. So hopefully came into this with a fair amount of background and credibility. But back to the origin story of the Swell. After my last company I built with my husband called Babble, we were acquired by Disney. And when I left Disney, as I mentioned, I had built sort of Nerve in our 20s, identity crisis, Babble in my 30s. When I left Disney after we had fulfilled on our contract, people joked like, what's next for you and your husband? A midlife crisis site? And I was like, that's really funny. But at the time when I went on to start my next company, I was really ready to spread my wings. So my husband and I started 2 new companies. I went out independently and raised money to build a company around short format learning, as I mentioned. And that really started gaining traction. We built a viable product. We found our product market fit. We started licensing our library of content. It was sort of like a modern Lynda, if you guys are familiar with Lynda, sort of Lynda 2.0. And that's when I really hit a wall, just personally, where, I felt I've got probably one more company in me, and I really want this to be the thing that I build for the rest of my life. And as this, ironically, as I'd raised another round for this company, I really was going through my own midlife awakening. And Pilar, I had brought on early on as an incredible advisor to the early company. And together, when we started, I started sharing sort of ideas around reshaping it. And collectively, we really remodeled it around the Swell. So we went back to our investors. And for anyone that's pivoted, it was a sort of a ballsy moment, because we had raised money, pretty significant money. We had had real traction in the marketplace. And I went in front of the investors and said, my heart, like my calling is leading me in this other direction. And I'm prepared to sort of return what I have left. But I really believe we can build this into something meaningful. And here's my vision for it, Pilar and I's vision for it. And they were thrilled. And, we have their full support and are now actually in the midst of our next raise.
Great, great. So where did you come up with the name Swell?
So the Swell was, it's never easy to come up with these names. And, we really struggled. And, first you have to find an available URL or someone that's willing to sell it to you, unless you want to be like a dot something, something, something. But, there were so many different ideas. We really went deep on root languages and, learning, curiosity, a coming together, a real sense of community, of growth, of potential and forward motion. And somehow, we got into root languages and we came upon Swell. And, initially, it had sort of medical connotations or surfing connotations, but when you really think of it, it is this collective force that comes together and grows larger and then really sort of flows forward. And after some time, we just went with it.
Great. Thank you.
And the nice guy that owned it sold it to us.
The URL.
Most importantly.
Oh my gosh, that's always a challenge too. From Dave Torrey, Chip joked about MEA competing with you. So the question is, how are you segmenting your market differently?
Well, I would say, I think when people are building these companies, it's always so, building a business, as everyone knows, is an incredibly humbling experience, but also so much fun. And I think there's always a lot of room in the marketplace, for people to play in all the same areas. And I think, we're all bringing our own personal stories and hearts into what we're doing. We have so much admiration for what Chip is building and can't wait to come. And I would say, we're really focused on our, Pilar and I joke that we're problem solving our own lives and really sort of building a business and a content platform and a community around it. So I would say there's probably going to be a lot of opportunities to intersect and partner. We're really focused on creating a fair amount of content and learning materials that could be distributed, and connecting with sort of thought leaders and experts and scientists to really help us sort of understand what we're up against in this phase of life and give us sort of actionable information that we can then utilize.
I think it would be interesting to create a Venn diagram of ageist, the Swell, and MEA.
Yes. Yes.
And see what's in the center there, because there's a lot of comparability. The good news is there's an enormous market here.
Yeah.
And you know, we are ultimately each building our own communities that can in fact have the opportunity to intersect. So
Absolutely.
David, do you have a thought on that?
No, I'm endlessly impressed.
Okay.
I just like I'm a total fanboy at this point. I'm just like,
We both are. All right, let's go back to
I
questions.
think one of the things that we all share is a kind of evangelism around this, because I think so much of this is about perception and self-perception. And as much as, you know, we all sort of feel empowered at this phase of life not to have our perceptions shaped by the outside world, we are human. And I think it's, you know, the parallel to motherhood, as Alisa mentioned, you know, we were supposed to be making star-shaped sandwiches and smiling as we, you know, carried 4 children in our arms. And I think it's a, you know, there's a real parallel here where we're actually supposed to feel like, you know, all right, we're being, you know, kicked off on the iceberg and slowly sinking. And the reality is we've never felt better. So how do we reconcile? Like that's, I think our yen has always been about sort of not just messaging for the sake of the marketing, but actually because we want to hold up a mirror to people and have them feel really good about this life stage, in addition to, and actually as we, you know, workshop our own lives and each other's lives and hold up the mirror and say, no, this is what we look like. Not this other nonsense that's been fed to us.
I just want to tell Pilar, like, it works. That like I think the youngest person we've ever done is like 48, and kind of the mean is about 60.
Yeah.
Half of our audience is under 50, and like a quarter of them are under 30.
So yeah,
because if you make it aspirational,
that's right.
people want to know. They want to like, oh, how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
So we had like we have a term for that, the mid-rising.
Mid-rising.
And they
I
want
like
to
it.
be in the club.
Not to be confused with mid-rise jeans, but
Yeah.
mid-rising.
Oh,
Although the
the
mid-rise jeans do hold it in.
our big surprise at MEA has been, so we originally said during our beta period, we had 13 cohorts in the first half of 2018. And we said you have to be between 45 and 65. And then we realized we were wrong. That was our definition of midlife. And as it turns out, we've had people from age 30 to 88 in our 750 alums. And 25% of them are evenly distributed outside, either older or younger than 45 to 65. So there are a lot of people in their 30s who are feeling in midlife because they're a professional model, professional athlete, you know, a software engineer. They work in the advertising business. Good job, David, in terms of taking the advertising business to task last week in Ageist. And they feel irrelevant at 35. And then there's people who are feeling like 72 years old and like, I'm at the best in my career right now.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, I think we have to recognize that midlife is a marathon. And the way you get through it is to shed your baggage, because no one wants to run a marathon carrying a lot of baggage.
But AARP would like to offer you a free duffel bag with their card.
More questions. Keep the questions coming. Go ahead, Laura.
All right, so I love this comment from Sarah Vogel. Neither of you look over 30, just saying.
Oh,
Yeah.
Look at all my grays. I have lots of grays right here, lots.
You do, actually.
I do. A lot of
Wear
them.
them well.
They're just here.
Yeah, but your skin,
I do a comb over.
Okay. You're not the only one. So
we did talk about the launch of the brand happening back in March, literally as the pandemic was happening. Question came from Jennifer Sheridan. Did you have a different strategy or model for launching the brand and then have to quickly pivot and take it all online, or was it always meant to be online?
So we had always envisioned, our product in sort of different sort of versions, right? So when we launched, we had originally intended, we wanted to begin sort of in person. We love this idea of an opportunity to come together over shared sort of experience conversation, whether it was dinner or other intimate gathering. And we were focused initially on in-person. COVID obviously changed that, but V2 of our product was always going to be digital. I mean, we were always focused on sort of how will this scale? How will we eventually, because we want to eventually reach millions of people, but we wanted to begin sort of small, intimate, to learn a lot, to really connect with our community and build sort of that brand and voice, and more rapidly move towards digital as virtual as most people did during COVID. But it was always part of our plan, and it allowed us to actually do much more more rapidly and to reach many more people. And as I'm sure we all know, people were really seeking connection during COVID. So it also was an opportunity for us to really bring that community together. And again, we very specifically, everything we address is through the midlife lens. So there's a lot of places you can go to talk about anxiety, depression, isolation, careers, parenting, but we do that all through the midlife lens. So we'd like to believe it's sort of a special opportunity to sort of address different things. And we had a lot of, COVID was obviously not a great time, but it was great to connect with our growing community digitally. And we didn't, we can't wait to see everyone in person, but it's been amazing how much you can sort of connect like this.
So in terms of connecting with others, and you talk about these pain points along this continuum during this life stage, what pain points or which experiences seem to be coming up as most painful or, rising to the top other than COVID? I mean, clearly that's key, but what's the next underneath that? Is it this, parenting? Is it sandwich parenting? Is it my career becoming irrelevant?
I think it's all the things, frankly. I mean, I think we could, yes, and I think that, I think we hear a lot about relationships when facing, adult or adolescent children or pending empty nest. I think as Alisa always says, we army crawled our way through parenthood and building careers. And it's a perfect visual, because that is what it feels like. You just feel like you are in the zone, and you don't have a chance to really evaluate the relationship often. And that's the sort of thing that comes into stark relief, is that, it's just us, I mean, it's such a cliche, but it's very real. And so in looking at your partner and looking at yourself, and I think, the self-actualization is the big thing that's at the root of all of this, of course, which is, who am I after I've, had a career, raised children, done all the things? Who do I want to be? And I think that's the sort of the adolescent connection, is this adolescence. As I look at my own adolescence, and I see them sort of saying, who do I want to be? And I think we're facing this, which is both exciting and terrifying, because we felt that these things were actually quite fixed for a long period of time until now. So it's terrifying and exciting.
And I would add to that, we have an opportunity to obviously learn a lot from our community. And we always say, for everyone listening, that really members, subscribers, community members are the product. Everyone is living this phase of life. You are all bringing your unique expertise, wisdom, life experiences to the table. And we really enjoy learning about them, because we're all collectively in it together and then sort of navigating them. But to your question, Laura, I would say some of the things that we've learned from the community that are sort of top of mind is personal growth, as Pilar was just touching on, which, could span a lot of different things. We've been addressing anxiety a fair amount, resentment, regret, sleeplessness. Why are we all awake at 3 a.m.? Midlife parenting, which, as Pilar was mentioning and has come up here, is this intersection of sort of midolescence and adolescence, right? Where you're sort of, colliding in very sort of tumultuous times together, hormonally, on a cellular level. So really all of the things that I'm sure it'd be interesting to hear from others, all of the sort of things that are most pressing, but happiness, personal growth, and then all the things that we're sort of unpacking after years of maybe pushing aside are really starting to surface. And that's sort of the joy of getting to unpack this stuff with sort of science and each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. So why do you think Madison Avenue and the ad dollars are not yet reflecting or leveraging the power of the 50+ community, who clearly, I forget what the numbers are, but they are the share of wallet. I mean, they have the most discretionary income, and yet Madison Avenue continues to advertise.
Unbelievable. Well, it's unbelievable, and we feel like this is the big opportunity. We sort of joke that this is the undiscovered gold mine in the marketplace, right? We are such an overlooked demographic and have been historically underserved, yet to your point, have never, we have time, we have influence, we have wisdom, we have money that we really want to spend in a more meaningful way. And we're willing and ready to spend that money on ourselves. And we have a growth mindset. So I think the market is starting to catch up. I think because we're living longer, I think obviously the pharmaceutical companies have had to really sort of rethink, addressing, they used to stop addressing you at 70 because you were gone, or 80, and now, we're living into our 90s, 100s. So it's really disrupting the whole pharmaceutical industry as well. But we absolutely agree. And we'd like to believe that, by us all collectively redefining midlife, that we are really going to awaken these brands.
Yeah. David's going to help lead us into that charge.
He is. And I want to we're going to wrap in a moment, but I just want to say, what you just said really strikes me, Alisa. There's a woman named Mary Catherine Bateson. Her mom was Margaret Mead, and her father was Gregory Bateson, a famous psychologist. And she wrote a book and spoke about the midlife atrium. And what she said was that when we add longevity to our life, it's not like adding an extra bedroom or two in our backyard, as if you have more years when you're decrepit. She said you actually create a midlife atrium. And in that midlife atrium, you have light, space, air, sun coming in, and the opportunity to reflect in your midlife with the extra time in midlife to determine how you want to live the rest of your life, so that you can curate your life in a way that is suitable for how you want to live the second half of your adult life. And so the two of you are phenomenal. Between Aegis and the Swell and MEA, we certainly are kissing cousins, and really appreciate the fact that you've joined us. So thank you. Laura, are you okay with me? Do you want to say one more thing? Is there something else?
Yeah, a couple of things. People are asking, how do we learn about the Swell? You can follow them on Instagram, and that handle is @theswell.
Oh, it's actually This Is the Swell.
Oh,
Swell. Yeah, our handle is This Is the Swell in the world of available names.
Yeah.
Swell was taken. So it's This Is the Swell.
Yes.
The Swell. And we talked about doing a donation, and Pilar and Alisa have chosen Planned Parenthood. So if you have the means to donate and would like to, I'll put it in the chat box, how to donate to Planned Parenthood, which, very meaningful organization who, I swear, how long have they been around? It's got to be over 30 years.
Well, it's probably since Roe versus Wade, or even before. So, so thank you. It's such a joy to have you here. I also want to say a call out to Marion Goodell, who said she would love, 2 weeks ago, we did not call out Burning Man as an organization that could use money right now. So in the chat, I've put a link or the email to, or the URL to Burning Man's donation page. So much appreciated for those who want to give something to Burning Man. So David, I am going to say 2 weeks from now, we have a surprise guest. We're not going to tell you who they are, but I am, if David's okay with it, going to tell you the 2 guests after that, because, we're just ramping it up. Right, David? okay?
Yeah, the rocket has launched.
Is it, oh, I know exactly. So I don't have to say. Okay, I won't say. I won't say. We got some great guests coming. I'm not gonna say.
I have just a comment about the whole advertising thing and why it's so whack. So there's like only one thing you need to know. 40% of the US population is over 50. 6% of the people who work in advertising and marketing are over 50. There you go.
That's exactly right. You have like 12-year-old media planners is the problem. I mean, that's really inside baseball, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
Just knowing the ins and outs of this business. Yes. And
that's
it's anyway.
But
So
yes, we have amazing guests coming up.
I'm not going to mention them though, right?
No. I mean,
yeah.
Danny, right? Danny.
Okay. So Danny and the other Michael too. So Danny Meyer is going to be here 4 weeks from now. Danny Meyer on October 29th.
Nice.
If you know the restaurant business, this is probably the most famous restaurateur in the United States. The restaurant business has gone through basically a depression, more than a depression, the last 7 months. And Danny's going to come talk to us about that in 4
he
weeks.
is just a prince of a guy.
He's a prince of a guy. He's a midlifer. He's a longtime friend. And his book, Setting the Table, is the best book ever written on hospitality.
And Chip, special time, right?
Special time 1 hour earlier. And we'll make sure everybody knows. So we're going to, that one will start at 4 p.m. Pacific time because Danny goes to bed early. He's a
Of course
New
he
York
does.
guy.
He probably doesn't drink either.
He doesn't, I don't think. 2 weeks after that, November 12th, from Bali, Michael Franti will be calling in with his wife. Michael Franti, award-winning musician, who basically, I've known him for 35 years. He actually became famous in his 50s as a musician. That doesn't happen. Last week, he had a #1 hit on the radio. And Michael and his wife, who's 20 years younger than him, who have a yoga retreat center in Bali called Soulshine. They're going to be joining us and talking about how do you become a pop star in your 50s. So we have some great upcoming guests. 2 weeks from now, we have a spectacular guest. Oh, come in. Wait, what timing? This is Eli. You want to say hi to everybody, Eli? Oh, what amazing timing. Okay, we're going to say goodbye to everybody now because Eli and Ethan and I are supposed to have, it's bedtime. So let's say goodbye. All
Chip,
right.
David, Laura,
Thank you so much.
thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
So much
Bye.
fun. Thanks, Laura.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Thank you so much.
So Pilar, you guys are heroes.